And welcome to another recording of the Content Marketing Studio. We are back for another season to help you create better online content faster. I'm your host, Pascal Fintoni, and today I'm joined by online marketing consultant and podcast executive producer, Ashleigh King. Ashleigh, welcome to the Content Marketing Studio.
Thank you so much. And it's so great to be here with you today. I'm really excited and I love your background.
Well, thank you very much. That's what I've gone for, spotlights, and I can change the colors depending on the mood, but compliments to your setup as well. I like that.
It's funny, I'm an entrepreneur, so I love to read any books about personal development, but especially how to do more with things smarter. So I'm a big fan of a lot of the books on my shelf. You'll see they're all time management focused or negotiation, things like this, building tribes, communities, all of that stuff. And yeah, I love flowers and nature. So yeah, there's a few different things behind me, but thanks for saying that.
Not at all. So let me start with two important questions at this moment in time. Where are you and how are you doing?
So it's really good that you're asking that, because for many people around the world, depending, when they listen to this, for most of us, 2020 has been hell, or it's been what many people are saying, a corona coaster, ups and downs. So for me, I'm actually in my husband's workplace physically. So there's a cool place called Holt's Yard, which is in the Northeast. Yeah. And they have these gorgeous little offices called the Teapot Studios rather. And so that's really nice because it's such a lovely place and they like these little container rooms. So I love recording here, which is brilliant. It's nicer than doing it at home. And what I would say is with the lockdown or with the changes at the moment, the physical space I would normally record in is not possible for me to go into. So I would normally be in a professional studio, and I know we're going to chat about studio versus recording from home and all that kind of stuff, but I prefer the studio. So I'm just in this lovely kind of space that I get to hang out in, and I love it. How am I feeling? I'm great. I actually feel really good because in the first lockdown, I learned so much about everything that I wanted to fix. So I am an entrepreneur, have my own business, and it was events focused. So in a couple of days, I lost my income for the year immediately, probably around 10 to 15K in cancelled contracts and things like that, festival work, creative installations, conferences, creative events with different community elements, all of that just kind of went. So for me, the second lockdown, I'm okay because I've pivoted completely. I created an online podcasting course for beginner podcasters. And yeah, I feel like I'm in a good place. I just wish that people could be with their families a bit more, but we all want to keep safe, so we get it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much. So for our viewers and listeners, let me remind you that Ashleigh King, as I mentioned a moment ago, is a consultant and podcast creator. She's the founder of creative consultancy Days Like These Are Sweet. Lovely title. She's the host and executive producer, of the Nurture Your Zest, which will be at the heart of our conversation today. A podcast, and as you heard a moment ago, she's the author of Get Your Podcast Started with Ashleigh King. But she's also the president and executive producer of TEDx Newcastle University, and just as you thought this was quite enough, she's also worked very hard on her MBA.
Yeah, so that sounds like a whole spiel. It sounds like loads of different things. And the thing to say there is, I very recently was diagnosed with ADHD, which I did not know I had. I was always told I was very energetic, to have a lot of projects on the go. And actually, it's the hyperactivity that is part of this neurological difference that makes me want to have so many projects. But I love it. I thrive on chaos, especially creative chaos, where I can be busy and, where there is just a lot happening. There's a lot of fun and, just things happening. So that is one thing I've found really tricky, is not having the events or the people or the networking, the stimulation you would normally have in any normal year. But yeah, it's great to have lots of different projects. Things have simplified a little bit now because I've just finished my MBA recently. So I now am Ashleigh King MBA. I've got my, I'm finished. And so that takes a lot of my plate. With that means that I'm no longer president of the Student Society because I'm no longer a student for
Right.
TEDx Newcastle Uni, but I'm still the executive producer of the conference that we may do or will do. And I also hold the license, which is really important because myself and a colleague, a student I took with me, we both went to California to TED Women to get the license we needed to run that event. So that was a huge investment, but so fun. And I'm so glad I did it. So lots of simplified, but it just means that now I can focus on, startups and podcasting. And that's just so much fun to have less, but have more focus.
Absolutely. And nice that you have your superpower officially recognized as well. So, shall we move into podcasting, which is at the heart of this conversation? You're taking part in a mini series I've called Meet the Podcasters. And I want to look at ways to inspire somebody to maybe begin their journey as a podcaster, or for someone who's been a regular host and producer to maybe look at ways to avoid burnout. Can I begin by saying that I am so pleased I use the term executive producer? I think it's just exactly right to have that label. Is this something that you adopted quite early on, or something that came a bit later as a title?
I think it came a little bit later, but what I discovered is, so I knew early on that I have certain skills, and then I have other people in my circle, who are behind me and who have backed me, sponsors, this kind of thing, who have their zone of genius. And so for me, I love to chat and I love to talk to people. So that is my biggest skill. And that's really when I'm working with learners, I teach them how to be more engaging, or how to find guests, or, how to deal with a difficult guest, that sort of thing. So for me, the chatting is the best bit. And I love the marketing side. The editing bores me to tears. And I can do it. And I know you also are fortunate that you have a team that you've built around you. But for me, I just love that I can hand over my episodes to Alice and my team, and she'll just do that for me. And she's brilliant. So I think in terms of executive producer, that came later, because what I realized is I was building the content, I was curating the guests, I was signing off on things. I was, doing all the marketing, raising funds to do sponsorship, paying for things. And actually, I felt really, it was really important to me that I got that recognition as well. Because I think if you are a podcast host, for many of us, or for many people, I'm now live streaming from home. So I'm doing more content for some of my sort of mini podcasts than I would have before. And I think if you're doing all of that, you are a producer, you're not just a host. So to be able to put on Podchaser, which is a great tip if anyone hasn't got it, I love that site. You can get your credits of the episodes you've been on. It's really important to actually acknowledge, well, you're not just the host, you might be the producer, editor, host. And so I see that executive producer at the top, almost like you have designed this. You are the kind of head of the brand or your own show. And I feel that exec producer function is really important to acknowledge for yourself more than for anyone else.
Oh, thanks for that. No, I would agree completely. So let's go back as far as we can to, the moment, that spark where you went, you know what? I'm going to give this podcasting malarkey a go. So did you start straight away with Nurture Your Zest, or did you have other pilots or other kind of experiments as such?
So it's funny because when I was 10 years old, I started my first newspaper, right? My dad is a journalist and has been very involved in the media my whole life. He studied journalism and performing arts at uni. And then I did similar subjects when I was at uni. So what I discovered is actually my dream was to be a festival or music journalist, to go to gigs or go to shows in the arts and to do journalism. Actually, for me, those dreams changed because of some traumatic circumstances in my life. So my best friend was murdered while I was at uni in Leeds. I was 20 and I was studying journalism, and I was just like, I can't do this. I don't want to be here. So I withdrew. And at the same time, it's almost like I lost my voice for a while. So I used to love to write. I used to write poetry. I used to go out in the streets and do like vox pops and things like this for uni. And I used to write for the student newspaper and things like this. And I lost my confidence. And so I went through this sort of period of not creating any content or really talking for a while. Especially not, out in the open for people to hear. And then I got to, several years later, I started writing again. I started doing different things. And I discovered that I wanted to blog more or post more and post on social media. And I also found that a lot of things were really easy for me. I loved creating colorful brands or pictures. Whatever I posted had such a great response. So it wasn't really purposeful. It was one of those things that you do naturally, but people start to talk about and they sort of say, wow, how come your posts get so much engagement? Or how do you do this? Or how do you do that? And it's one of those things where you kind of ping in your head and you think, oh, I'm actually naturally good at this. I can, go and create a charity event, raise some funds and talk about it online, do a quick video or whatever it might be. And so that's what I found as I was doing these kind of little videos, social media, and it was going really well. The engagement was going up, the analytics were going up, and that was really working. Then what happened is I was made redundant and I bought a ticket for an event called Newcastle Startup Week, which I'm sure you may have heard of. So I went to that and I met my producer. So I met Tim Lazinski from TL Multimedia, who is also a sponsor of Nurture Your Zest. What happened was he was doing sort of like a not virtual, it was like a traveling podcast, like a vox pop. So he was speaking to people at the conference and sort of saying, who are you? What's your startup? So I just had like a 3 to 5 minute chat with him and I thought nothing of it. And then the podcast came out. It wasn't the best, to be honest, but I got so many compliments on it and people were like, you've got such a weird accent. Where are you from? Or I love your voice or whatever it might have been. And that was the first sort of big step where I was like, wow, my dreams are not out, they don't have to be forgotten. The ones I had when I was 18, 20, I can still talk, I can chat, I can talk to people and I can be creative and I can celebrate all of that beautiful stuff. So that's where Nurture Your Zest was born. Actually, that's where my friendship or relationship with Tim, my producer, was born. Connected to that, I connected with Paul Scurra, who's my branding specialist. And that was through TEDx, actually. So he did a lot of stuff for TEDx Newcastle Uni in the previous year. And I was just like, hey, it's great. Let's have a meeting about TEDx. And from that, we had all these great chats. We started meeting regularly and decided we were going to build this brand and I was going to start a podcast. So I actually put a lot of effort into the brand and the website even before I'd recorded anything. But I would say that I started on the 1st of August thinking about anything. And I released my first episode the 23rd of September, 2019. So within 6 weeks. And it was just like, bang, here you go. Really brilliant guest for my first episode, Herb Kim, who's a very influential person in the northeast of England and the north of England. Also connected with TEDx Newcastle, which is one of the reasons why I know Herb and I'm, a big fan of his. And so, yeah, there were various sort of things that fell into place. It just felt so right. But it also shocked me that this was literally just from a quick conversation at a conference, Newcastle Startup Week, that then led to all of these different avenues. And I guess with that, when I was then made, I was going to say made redundant, that wasn't what I meant to say. When we had the lockdown in the UK, initially February, March, I couldn't go into the studio. So I wanted to keep that momentum going, keep that engagement up. That's where I learned to live stream. And that was scary because I would never have done it before. I would have stayed in the studio. So I think that's a really important point about, how do we perceive the content we're going to create, our ability, all of this. But I know that I'm chatting a lot. So I'd love to hear,
Well,
your
you're the
thoughts.
guest. That's the whole point.
It is. But yeah, that's like the story behind Nurture Zest. And it was really beautiful because along the road, there's been some amazing people who've come into it. Anne English, who I know we both know, and she's worked with you on other recordings. But I mean, Anne loved Nurture Zest and then began to do lots of visual doodles for me. So I've got a couple of some episodes in the past and all kinds of things. So it just kind of grew and grew and grew. And the thing I was most scared of, the live streaming, is the thing that's had the most engagement. So that's the funny thing, is like, I would never have done that, but I'm so glad I have.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Thanks very much. Let me just go back to a few things. So to begin with, of course, very sorry to hear that you had to go through this awful event in your life, and you've done so well. But isn't that funny? We are shaped by the highs and lows of our journey, all of us. I also want to kind of reflect on what you said, which is, it's actually about being out and about, that those encounters and those moments, take you to where you need to be. And one of the minor concerns that I have about this lockdown thing is that because we're not actually out and about as much, those connections are not happening. And are we on occasion losing the potentials, or is it going to come to us, perhaps next year when we are freer and we can meet again? But for me, the message I want to share, using actually your kind of what you share with us, be very careful, that the pursuit of content marketing, being a content creator and building a brand, is not really being on your own behind a laptop or a microphone. You have to make those connections. Can I ask you therefore about your current production method for a podcast? Actually, let me ask you the twofold. Before pandemic, what was the studio, and what were you doing there? And then afterwards, can you take us through the live streaming version of what you do?
Sure. So I actually have quite a slick system, to be honest, because as I've mentioned, I have ADHD. So I find it so easy to have templates and tools and systems, because that helps me, but it also helps manage other people's expectations, and it means I won't get lost. So one of the things I also teach in my podcasting course is things like templates and things like that. But in the past, I was a very busy student. So I only had one gap on a Tuesday evening, and it was between 5 and 6. So I knew I was consistently recording at that time. So that was easy because I knew I had that slot, and I would just find a guest for that slot. And so what I would always do is I would, get the booking link, all this kind of thing. So I would maybe use Calendly, which I love, and I'm sure many people do because it saves so much time. So I would do that. I would also complete briefing notes. So prior to their coming into the studio, so they knew where the studio was, what the address was, the telephone number in case of emergency. I would let them know that they were going to get a professional photo taken. When they would get that photo, I would also give them some kind of ground rules about the show. So some sort of general briefing notes. So it will be things like, okay, to save editing time, we're just going to have a conversation. Please know these are the house rules of Nurture Zest. It's about inclusivity. So please be, open to talking in a constructive, helpful way, a bit like TEDx. TEDx has very strong rules like this, but being solution focused and positive rather than the negative kind of stuff. Not swearing, that's a big one for me. My brand's very fun, but it's also kind of innocent in a way. So that's a big part. So I think expressing that to your guest when they then come in, they're like, okay, I know what I'm doing, and they've got their briefing notes and that sort of thing. So that was my process. And so that worked like clockwork. It was brilliant. Because I was in the studio, the very next day or a couple of days later, Alice would send me my edits and I would be ready. So I would upload it to Spreaker, which I use as my distribution channel, would go out to all the channels, and then that would be it. I would just need to market it. So really simple. And I would then edit my website, embed the various things I wanted to embed, and I would then post and tag all the guests and that sort of thing. Because I had arranged sponsors, and just to be clear, they were in-kind sponsorships. So I paid for a reduced fee, but it was, really, really low, and it was great. That then meant as well that I would always want to, name check the sponsors. So I actually built a checklist for myself so I didn't forget any of these things. But every time I would post an episode, I would then, name check the sponsors and all that kind of stuff. I would also take a photo when the guests were in the studio just to kind of help with a little bit of extra promotion. So then you get a bit of a buzz. Great, I've had this person here today. And then a few weeks later, the episode comes out. And part of that whole system that I had was I had these professional photos. So with building the brand, I knew that I was always going to ask, what is your number one word to nurture your zest? And with those one words, I've got this beautiful wall of different people and their words. So I knew I wanted fun, quirky pictures that were a very specific style. And that's really helped to make the brand stand out. And it's what I get complimented on the most. Now, that's great. And all of that is good in a studio. Then when you're live streaming, you can't do the professional images. So now you need to ask for a bio, ask for a headshot. They're often not the best quality, depending who you're talking to. In terms of live streaming, you then are I use StreamYard. I find that the best. I've looked at other tools like Zoom and other things. For me, StreamYard is best because I find it really quick. I like how the comments come up. I also can do the branding I want. I find the quality of it great. And one of my podcast mentors that I look up to, Ian Farrer, is the one who told me about it. So it's a really cool tool. So I now send my guests instructions on how to use StreamYard prior to coming. I still send my briefing notes, but they've been changed. So I'll still say, this is Nurture Your Zest. This is what the vibe is. Please don't swear, etc. But I'll also say, here's your link to join us. Please send your booking note. I also use Calendly still. So this way I can get the consent to join the mailing list if they want to get the consent to use the image online. That is something I missed in the beginning, the consent to use people's images online. And I wish I had done that earlier. I also wish I'd started a mailing list earlier. So that's been a new thing. But I do feel on the whole, there has been quite a lot of systems in comparison to other content creators or other podcasters that I've worked with or been a guest on their show. So I love the live streaming. It's fun. It's just not as with my brand as I would like it to be sometimes.
Yeah, thanks very much. As you could tell, I was making notes. I want to go back to a few things. So let's go back to the studio. I'm so jealous. What is it or was it like? I mean, were people walking into a normal studio? Did you have it set up more like a welcoming living room, or was the feeling environment there?
So it was very much, it's in a basement of a building, which is great. It's next to Pink Lane Coffee shop. So it's called the Old Post Office, and TL Multimedia is downstairs, which is brilliant. It just means I haven't been able to have any guests who have accessibility requirements, which is a shame because I've got a brilliant one I want to have on. But I can still live stream, so that's okay. So they would come down the stairs, and it's a really nicely set out space, really tidy. And I'd, welcome them. They'd then go in and have their photo with Paul, the branding specialist that I've worked with. And then once they've had their photo with Paul, they'd come through to the studio with me and Tim, my producer, or Alice if Tim wasn't available. Alice is my editor. And we would just, have a brief kind of chat and kind of warm up, and then we'll start recording. What I liked about that is within 45 minutes to an hour, they'd come in, have their snap, come through, sit down, all of the kit's ready, all of the sounds ready, everything works perfect every time. And then in a couple of days, I'd have the edited copy. So it was beautiful. You asked about the setup. So it was very much like sitting at a desk with the headphones and the mic, but a little bit clinical, just because it's a podcasting studio that anyone could use. So for instance, Northumbria Police use it. Paul Lancaster, who did Newcastle Startup Week, he has his Super Connector show there, and lots of other creators. So it's very much, it needs to be versatile. For me, my dream would be to have what you've said about that community element or that sort of lounge feel. So I would love to have one day, that is my dream, and I've got big dreams, but to have a sofa and to have beautiful, a creative installation behind me, or with my guest, have two sofas, and have a really nice, juicy chat. I think sometimes when you have the headphones on, when you have the mic, it's good because you feel like you're putting on a uniform, but it can also feel like there's a barrier there, because you behind the barrier, and especially when you're at a desk. So I think for some of the fun stuff that you want to do, it's nice to have that kind of chair feel.
Yeah, during the beginning of lockdown, I went through this crazy quest for information. I was researching essentially inspiration for studios because I was going to convert one of the rooms of the house. And I've got a fold-down flipboard. So an app that I absolutely love where you could just save web pages from people literally sat on bin bags all the way to people who had recreated a movie studio, which is great because I think you're right. Whilst it may be audio only as content, the environment actually can really support what you can do. What is it about live stream that has added some very interesting kind of layers in terms of production, and because of course you have the element of audience participation, which would have been new to you. So has that been a good thing, or you're not sure yet?
I think it's been a great thing. So, for instance, over the summer in June, I dedicated my platform to talking about Black Lives Matter as a movement. And so I only interviewed during that time Black content creators or Black entrepreneurs. And that was a decision for me because coming from South Africa, I experienced the aftershocks of apartheid, and having ancestors or family or the people around me involved in some of those things. So for me, that was not like a jumping on the bandwagon. That was a real thing that I felt passionate about changing, the kind of dialogues that we have around certain social issues. With that, there were some comments, so we had some chats, and things did get a little bit contentious at times. I wouldn't say massively. I expected it to be more. It was more your usual kind of, I'm not racist, but what do you think about this? Or I don't really get that, or this type of thing. But what I found helpful is that actually it created this opportunity for dialogue with people who would never normally engage with the subject. So that was nice. And I think it's good with comments using something like StreamYard, which is why I love it so much. You might be live streaming on Facebook, but you can actually choose which comments you want to show. So there could be something that's really controversial that you don't want to show, and you just delete the comment. I've had that before live streaming, where I've had some marriage proposals from some countries, and so I've just deleted them so nobody sees them. And that's great. So you don't have everything flowing and coming up. And I think that's really important. I think it's nice for people to be able to see you and see your personality and how you flow. It really creates a deeper connection. So I think that's been a beautiful thing about live streaming. And the biggest thing I would say is the engagement. So prior to lockdown, prior to starting to live stream, I would get quite good web traffic. So I usually get a lot of interest from North America and, Canada, all over North America, really, but all the way through to, Spain, Liechtenstein, Africa, all over the world, which is great. When I started live streaming, that grew even more. So actually, I only in the past used LinkedIn because I wanted to grow my profile. And what happened then is when I started live streaming on Facebook, the exponential interest in the website, in my own analytics on Facebook, I found that the thing driving traffic to my website was actually Facebook. And it was such a huge difference. So I would never have expected to live stream, but it's been brilliant for increasing the audience and things like that.
No, thanks very much. And a reminder for all of us to always be experimenting and always be pleasantly surprised by the results, because really that's what the digital environment provides, just surprises about the way people behave. And I mean, I hear this story all the time. Someone said, well, I was doing this and then one day I was kind of pushed that way. And as a result of which I'm discovering new ways to promote my business. So talking about marketing, Ashleigh, what have you got in place? You talk about process a moment moment ago. So what is part of the marketing machine to help you push your, I suppose, as replay your episodes?
Sure. So I just wanted to comment on something you said before about being open to change and looking and experimenting. I think that's so important. And also tracking. So, actually looking at your analytics, looking at who's listening, how many plays. It's not about getting hung up on the numbers. It's just about, are they increasing? And, that can be really meaningful sometimes to find out who's listening, what country are they in, did maybe one of your episodes not work out? So I think tracking is a really important thing, and I do that. So there's a tool called Sprout Social that I love. I'm not actually using it at the moment, because for anyone interested, I would advise you to look at that if you've got a bigger show, or do their trial for a little while. But it's quite expensive. It's about £97 a month, or $97. So it's good for a trial, but then cancel it. The reason I like Sprout Social is it gives you very detailed reports and analytics. It could be in CSV file, it could be in screenshots, in a PDF. And that has been helpful, because one of the things I didn't do in terms of marketing, and it's really important, I didn't have a press kit ready. So earlier in the summer, I was approached by quite a big organization. I'm not going to say who they were, but they asked me if I would do a special episode for them promoting an upcoming event. And they also asked me to do some shout outs in my own words about their upcoming event. So it was going to be a sponsorship arrangement, but where they wanted certain things. And one of the things they wanted was my listenership. So they wanted to know the audience, they wanted to know the metrics, and they wanted to see all of that kind of demographic stuff. Is it women? Is it men? Which traffic is it? Is it LinkedIn? Is it Facebook? Where are they in the world? And so I wasn't ready for that. And that's why I think for anyone listening, to get ahead of that, it's why in my podcasting course, I've now created that as a template, how to create your own sponsorship kit. Because I think tracking metrics for that reason is great, and having that ready if you need it. So in terms of marketing processes, I guess, again, it's a checklist. So I know that, for instance, I'm going to do this type of post on Twitter, this type of post on Instagram, this type of post on Facebook, and actually working through a set of tools and what do I want to do. And if anyone's interested, I don't know if it's a good freebie for you, Pascal, for your listeners or your viewers, be happy to share my marketing checklist for after each episode, because that's helped me so much. But yeah, I think definitely posting it out is important. I think as well, I mentioned about not doing the mailing list. That's something I'm working on now. I'm also working on a shop, because I've had so many guests in the past who've come on the show and then they're like, I really want to give something away, and they have, but I've not put it on my website. So it's about having a space that you can kind of hold all those affiliate things. And that's been interesting to adapt to, because what's happening now, this week I've been sent a puzzle to do for Christmas. So I've got a beautiful puzzle coming of Santa going over the Tyne Bridge, and I'm going to make some content, do the puzzle, and then they're coming on the podcast. I've got some booze coming, which is great, before someone comes on the podcast. So, there's a lot of things like that start to happen. But I do think as well, we can lose our guests or lose our audience by not really appearing like we know what we're doing. And that's where I think the checklists and tools and stuff like that can really help. So yeah, I think marketing is a super big piece. I will say one thing that I would say is the biggest lesson I learned from marketing. And this is something that I'm a bit embarrassed to share, but it's just funny. So I knew with Nurture Your Zest that I wanted to create this whole brand, and we worked really hard on it. And so with my Instagram page from the beginning, we had this idea of zest and overcoming the prickly situations in life so you can nurture your zest. So we had picture, cactus, picture, cactus, quote, picture. And there was this grid that we created with 9 images. And I think maybe 3 of them were cactuses or 4 of them were cactuses. And what happened is it was so easy to get lost in that grid because of how complicated it was. So you really need to stay on top of what you're doing and be consistent. And so one of the things I did was I put too many posts up in one day, and Instagram blocked me. And so I was blocked from Christmas till around April, where I then had this situation where I had this beautiful grid, but I didn't want to add anything to it because I hadn't posted since Christmas. And I was then thinking, well, do I delete everything or not? Because I'm going to have to post it again. So this is something I would say, like, really think out what you're going to do, what's actually achievable. If life gets busy, if it gets messy, that much content was too much. So what would have been better would have been, person cactus, person quote, that sort of thing. And you can change it around in whatever way you want. You don't even need to do something like that. You can just put whatever you want on your Instagram. I mean, it's nice to have a good visual look and to have a nice brand across everything. But I think you have to do what's feasible for you and your lifestyle.
Thanks very much. Can I ask you, do you remember how you felt in recording episode 1? And and how you dealt with it? I suspect a little nervous, the unknown, and how that might help. So obviously someone thinking about starting, but also how you keeping yourself excited about being a podcast producer and avoiding burnout, on the two kind of the two extremes.
I think that's so important. So in terms of how I felt, I was super nervous. So I knew that I just wanted to chat. And what I did, and I would advocate for anyone else, is I recorded a bunch of stuff in one go. And that helps so much, because if you lose interest, you've got the content there ready. The worst thing you can do is do your first episode, record it, tell everyone you're so excited, and then next week comes and you just can't be bothered and you've got no content, So I think that's why it's great to record ahead of time. So for me, I've always got about 6 weeks of content to release. And that's great. And I also try and think about upcoming national days and, things I want to comment on. So in terms of that first episode, I was super nervous. And that's why I chose Herb Kim, because I knew that my type of show was going to be a chat show, an interview type scenario, because I didn't have a co-host. I didn't necessarily want to teach on something at that time. And I just wanted to do it as a profile raising activity, but also just a space to have important conversations. So to be able to invite someone like Herb, because of his profile and because of the fact, he's a very curious person, his number one word to nurture his zest is curiosity. So we had a really nice chat themed around curiosity and about TEDx and about him moving to the UK from New York and all of his story. So it was really interesting. And then I think that's where, if you have a bit of a structure on what you're going to talk about, it doesn't mean you can't vibe with people. But if you have a structure weaved through, it helps you to stay focused and get excited, because everyone's got a different story. But it also helps your audience stay engaged. So it prepares them for what's coming next, and they sort of know the format. It also means your guests, before they come on your show, kind of know what you're going to talk about. I don't know about you, but I often listen to someone's podcast before I guest on it, because I want to make sure that I'm ready. So yeah, those are the feelings I had. And I made it a little bit better, because at that time, I don't do it right now just because I had to cut cash flow. But I used to give gifts. So when Herb came in at the studio, I gave him a thank you gift. And it was like all these little cute things that were inexpensive, but they would help him to nurture your zest. And they are very, symbolic things. And so that was really cute. And it went down really well. And he shared that on, on social media and stuff like that. So it was fun. So yeah, the first one I would say I was mostly excited. If I listen back to it now, oh my gosh, I was so nervous, and I can hear it. Even my kind of conversations very, I would say almost like a bit too formal. But it was fine. And, sometimes you need to do that. With some guests, you will take on a more formal persona than others. So yeah.
And for the first few, did you have literally like in front of you Postits or a document with the questions you were going to ask, or was it more free form than that?
Yeah, so I'm a very visual person. So often I'll have a doodle on a paper notebook in lots of colors. I might have, with live streams especially, I'll have Postits behind the camera. So like now when I'm talking to you, I've got like little Postits of keywords that I might want to say. You don't have time to have like long scripted things you want to say. But I think especially live streaming, it's a great way to keep focused. And I do that when I record myself training as well. I've got like keynotes. I think it's good to have some notes, but also just a free flow as well. And I think that's why the briefing notes for guests, that process is important, because they know what to expect, you know what to expect. And in your own mind, having the sort of structure right can help. That was a bit of a teething in the beginning, because I had this great sponsorship arrangement with my producer, but also he was staying late on a Tuesday night when normally they would finish, but they were there because that was the only time I could record. So it was like, come in, do the thing and go. And it took us a little while to get into, well, if we leave it this late, we're going to be running over. Or so that's how I think, you can sort of prepare and plan it, and it gets a little bit easier. But in the beginning, you just don't know. It's really fun. And also, if you've got guests who are super chatty like me, sometimes you actually need to help them out of the studio, which is fun. Managing guests is a whole story on its own.
Oh, thanks very much. So many important lessons in there. I've got one final question for you, then we can move on to what I'm going to call a fun quiz, but it's fun for me anyway. You'll tell me afterwards. Can I ask whether you have plans for Nurture Your Zest in terms of how you might move the podcast forward, or are you frankly just happy the way it is at this moment in time and you're going to keep going?
Sure. So Nurture Your Zest in the studio is just called Nurture Your Zest, and those are like those podcasts. And then I have Nurture Your Zest 100 Conversations. That is my live stream. That is the way I see I'm able to have global conversations with people in other countries. For instance, tonight I'm going to be chatting to brilliant content creator in Atlanta. So that's great. It helps facilitate that. So I have a separate show called Nurture Your Zest 100 Conversations. I do have other podcasts. I have MBA with Ash, which is not a very big one. It's not a regular one, but it's just me chatting to other MBA students about their journey, or MBA graduates. So it's something now that I've finished, I'm kind of leaving behind, but I will still do occasionally. TEDx Newcastle University is something that I love doing. That's a very infrequent podcast, but that's more of a on the day conference thing. Or if I go back to TED Women one day, something like that. So you asked about Nurture Your Zest specifically. I see that. I mean, I've got such big dreams and I've got a vision board. So what I'll say is I have huge dreams for it. I would love to have that idea of my own studio or space that's styled, which has sofas and cool creative stuff in the background. A bit, almost like a whole brand on its own. I would love to have merchandise. I would love to have, really cool inspirational gifts. With that whole brand, I created 5 keywords. So 5 values, and they are curiosity, courage, creativity, inspiration, and zest. And each of those keywords has its own color, has its own smell, has its own kind of animal or plant or space. So for instance, courage is very South African orientated. It's got the baobab tree, it's got the lion, it's the roar, it's got, sunflowers or all kinds of things. So for me to make that come alive, that is my real goal. A lot of that I can't do right now because of lockdown. So the events element of my business is now no more. The only events I do now are TEDx or Nurture Your Zest events. So that's my dream. I want to have big, beautiful live events that are really inspiring and joyful and positive. And that when you walk in, you just kind of go, oh my word, look at this. There's like circus people, there's like flowers, just the whole thing makes you come away and think about it for years to come. That's my big goal. But in the meantime, podcasting is part of that. So I'm building something and I've got big dreams, and I think it's nice to have big dreams and hold on to them, because we can manifest whatever we want.
Super. Thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure to be in conversation with you, because I think in there you're helping us reflect about how we might get started, how we might, of course, continue. But really, I love the way you look after your guest. And I think there's some important hints in there about how we might take some of that on board. Before you go, let's move on to the fun quiz. Are you ready for this?
I'm so ready and
All
scared.
right. So, if you could have a Zoom call with a famous person, perhaps from the world of science, business, or entertainment, who would that be?
Hmm. Do you know, I'd be really interested to talk to Bill Gates.
I bet.
The reason I say Bill Gates is because I love to read. And one of the things I'm fascinated with what Bill Gates particularly, is the volume of books he gets through a week. I think he goes through 8 to 10 a week. He's got some sort of amazing speed reading situation going on. So yeah, I think that would be interesting. And similarly, I would be really interested to talk to Elon Musk. He's, South African. He's done some cool stuff. And I'm just like that he's a maverick. So those are two people I would really like to talk to in that space, and the business entrepreneurial tech space.
Okay. Well, we'll be releasing all those messages around Christmas, so you never know. Miracles could happen. So it can't be just about work, though. So how about we organize your own online concert for you and your family?
Mm.
Who would be the band or the artist playing for you, maybe on Facebook Live?
Mm. I'm a huge Lana Del Rey fan. I think I just love her voice. I think it's so unusual. I'm also a big Robin fan. I think she's so quirky and funky. So, gosh, how to choose? I love music. There's just so many different genres as well. I love rock music. So, like, who would my family all love? But for me, I think it would probably be someone like Lana Del Rey. I think she's great.
Okay. No problem at all. Well, let's get some food organized then. So what food would you order to enjoy the concert?
So food wise, oh my gosh, I'm such a big fan of Mediterranean food. Like that is my life. I just love olives and sun-dried tomatoes, or cherry tomatoes with bell peppers with feta, or cream cheese in. I just love anything Mediterranean, stuffed vine leaves, all of it. So hummus, just that kind of stuff. If you gave me that to eat every single day, and salad, I'd be happy. I mean, avocado, throw some of that in there. It's just basically finger food. It's my favorite thing in the world. I love the variety, I think, and the colors. That's what makes me smile the most.
Yeah, I can't. Yeah, I love it as well. I mean, each time we go to a restaurant, if I can get the antipasto, you
Yes.
know, and usually it's for two, but I just eat it all for myself. I don't share it. I don't know about you, but I don't share this stuff.
No, I'm the same. Yeah, I think it's great. It's so fun. I love antipasto, and I love I just love the textures. There's so much different textures and flavors on those types of boards. So yeah, totally agree.
Super. Now, if you could have your own radio show, what would you talk about and who would be your co-host?
I've thought about that before, because I mentioned about the journalism when I was younger. And I am actually starting a new co-hosted podcast with Nicola Jane Little, if
Oh,
you've
brilliant.
heard of Nicola.
Mhm.
So Nicola runs Mint Business Club, and she has just been diagnosed with ADHD, just like me. So we are starting a podcast all about neurodiversity, but also just the crazy situations we get ourselves into because of our brains. And so that's going to be super fun. I think if it was like, you could do it with anyone in the world, I'm not really sure about the radio show part, but just the show. I'm such a big fan of Drew Barrymore, and I love that she's just released her own Drew Barrymore show, and that whole vibe of like having her sofa and the nice space. That's like my dream. So I would love something like that. I think someone fun and someone really quirky who sees the world in a really unique way. I think that would be the kind of person I'd want to vibe with.
Oh, no, it'd be great. I mean, just on that very quickly, it's amazing, all those artists who are releasing a podcast or a video show should be an inspiration for others out there. Final question for you. When all this is behind us and we can move and travel more freely, where would you like to go?
If I could go anywhere in the world, I
Mhm.
would probably love to go back to South Africa, just to see the animals and see just the space. I just love the smell of Africa. I love the smell of the rain after the thunder, the grass after the thunderstorm. It almost becomes this prickly heat in the air and the smell changes, So to see the African stars and to be with nature outdoors in Africa would be amazing. My husband's never been there, and we've been married for a long time and together for 10 years. So it's my goal sometime to get him to go there. So yeah, I think probably to go home would be beautiful. Have to say though, having gone to California last year for TED Women, I love California. I would love to go back.
No, super. Well, listen, thank you so much for taking part in the Content Marketing Studio. For our viewers and listeners, can you remind us where we might be able to track you down and watch and listen to your amazing shows?
Sure. So the best place to find me is probably nurtureyourzest.com, just because everything's there. You can find me on YouTube. My channel's not big enough yet to have my own YouTube/Nurture Your Zest, but that is on the horizon. I believe it will happen. So yeah, you can find me by searching in the YouTube bar for Nurture Your Zest. Facebook, if you want to catch a live stream, is a great place. And if you're a business person or you like to hang out on LinkedIn, that's my main channel that I like to hang out on. So that's the best place.
Super. Once again, thank you for being such a wonderful guest. And to you, our viewers and listeners, thank you for your support. Please leave comments, suggestions, and feedback in the usual places. Until the next time, go out there and make sure your content is better and faster. Bye for now.